Okay, so for week 13, Thursday, I am going to be talking about pages 77 through 100. But first, I am going to talk about our new set of vocabulary, Vocab 4. Okay, so this set of vocabulary, we have a number of delightful words for you. The first one, debilitate, has become startlingly relevant this year. It means to weaken. So if you contract COVID-19, you may be debilitated and unable to get out of bed. It can be, it doesn't have to be physically weakened. It could be emotionally weakened as well. So either way. Second one, ascertain, is to find out. Just keep going with my COVID theme here. To ascertain whether your cough is merely a cough or the coronavirus, you must go to the doctor and get a test, which involves sticking something very, very far down your nose. So that would be to find out that information. The third one, risque, describes something that is almost inappropriate. It's like not totally over the line, but it's pushing the line real hard. So sometimes I see clothing in school that is a bit on the risque side. It's not a blatant violation of dress code, but it definitely is suggestive and oftentimes lets me see a little bit more than I would like to see. So that would be one example of something risque. The fourth one, trepidation, describes the feeling of fear. So just note that it's not to fear something, it is the feeling of trepidation that fills your soul when you feel someone sneeze on your arm. I don't know. So something that makes you afraid. The fifth one, abyss, a bottomless pit. So if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, then perhaps you have gazed down the sides of the cliff into the abyss to see the very, very, very deep, dark hole in the ground. If you've ever seen the movie, 300, the "this is Sparta" moment where he kicks the dude down into the hole, that's always what I kind of picture when I think of an abyss. The sixth one, frugal, describes someone who is unwilling to spend money. Now, thinking about this in terms of diction and kind of connotations, frugal has a much more positive connotation than other words used to describe people who don't like to spend money. So if we call someone cheap or call someone a skinflint, then we're implying that they are holding on to money, selfishly and without cause. If we say that someone is frugal, we definitely are implying that they don't like to spend their money, but more in a, wow, they're really smart and they're saving it all up kind of way. So it's a slightly more positive connotation than some other words. The seventh one, parody, is a humorous imitation of something. So parody and satire are close cousins. They're all in the comedy genre. YouTube is a gold mine for parodies. Anything that you can think of out there, someone has probably made a video making fun of it. So I just referenced 300. There was a parody movie that came out about 300 called Meet the Spartans. And it was not serious at all. It was totally comedic and ridiculous and just kind of poking fun at the original. Now, satire is also poking fun at something, but it's to make a point. Parody, sometimes you're just trying to be funny. So that's kind of the difference between those two. The eighth one, illimitable, describes something that is endless. This quarantine period felt endless this spring. When will we go into phase 3? And when will we finally be able to go and see friends again? And, forever and ever and ever. The ninth one, harass, is to annoy, to bother, to get on someone's nerves. And obviously there are many different types of harassment. Some of the, benign kinds, like, oh my God, my little brother is annoying me. And then, the more serious stuff, sexual harassment and stuff like that. That's obviously a much more serious issue. The 10th one, agnostic, describes a person who is unsure of God's existence. So, I'm sure you're familiar with the term atheist, which is someone who firmly does not believe in a higher power. And then a theist is someone who does believe in a higher power. And there are many religions that are theist religions. So agnostic is the one in the middle. They're like, maybe, but I don't know. So that's kind of their position on the issue. Okay, so now that I've talked about that, let's talk about some In Cold Blood. I almost said Fahrenheit 451. Good grief. Okay, so persons unknown. So in this section, we continue to get reactions to the crime, both from people in the town, and we hear a little bit more from our killers. We also get the beginning of the investigation. So this first scene is a bit somber. The day after the killing, several friends of Herb Clutter are gathering together to try to clean some of the house. So, obviously, after a crime has occurred, someone has to clean up things unless they just plan on tearing the whole place down. So in this case, Mr. Clutter's friends are taking care of that very unenviable task. Getting rid of the couch and the mattress box, burning things where necessary, cleaning things where not necessary. Alfred Stocklein, who already, explained why he did not hear the shotgun shots. I'm assuming, he feels a bit culpable in some way, like, oh, I should have heard something, but, the west wind, the barn, that would have soaked up a lot of noise. And then, of course, the baby crying definitely would have been the nail in the coffin there. So anyways, they are getting out of town. They are moving. So that's very understandable. When we feel a place has been affected by death, we aren't keen to associate ourselves with it. So these men obviously are very somber as they go through this task, and for the most part, very, very respectful of Herb and his family. And so anyways, sad scene. That's that. So investigation. So this starts on page 79 and very quickly transitions to page 80. The lead detective, the one who we'll spend the most time with, is Alvin Adams Dewey. So Mr. Dewey is very personally invested in this case, becomes very personally invested in this case. He knew the Clutter family kind of by acquaintance, but the viciousness of the crime also upsets him and really gets to him. He's determined to find out what happened. So he is incredibly dedicated, and then he has 3 other agents who also are very dedicated in trying to figure out what happened in this situation. So start getting some facts. He said, I'm not willing to entertain theories just yet, but I'll talk facts. They do believe that, maybe one of the 4 was the main target, that one of them was targeted for some particular reason. Mr. Clutter is a popular theory because his throat was cut. So the victim that is different is often thought to be the one that, the rage or revenge or whatever is focused on. The coroner is unable to estimate in what order the family died. He does come out with an estimation later, but when we actually find out what happened in the crime, his estimation ends up being incorrect anyways. So just know that they died pretty close to one another between 11 p.m. Saturday and 2 a.m. Sunday. And later we do have it confirmed that it was after midnight on Sunday. Bonnie and Nancy, thankfully, were not sexually molested or sexually violated in any way, shape, or form. So that's one small mercy to their end. The press also has a lot of questions about whether it was one man or two. So they come up with a concept for both. They come up with a theory for both, the single killer concept and the double killer concept. So in the single killer concept, they think that it would be someone who knew the family, someone who knew that the doors weren't locked, and who would be able to take advantage of personal knowledge of the family. Now, the double killer concept is the one that Dewey leans towards, because in his mind, if Mr. Clutter had thought his family was in danger, he would have fought like a tiger. He's a big, strong guy, definitely would not have just let these things happen. So that's one reason that Dewey is thinking there had to be more than one man, because if Herb had thought he could successfully fight, then he would have. And there's evidence that he did actually fight, because it looked as if he had pulled out of his ropes and his hands. So anyways, all four instances, the same type of knot was used. So again, we're maybe thinking that Perry, who has more experience with knots, may have been, in charge of knotting up the individuals. So the double killer concept has a few faults, perhaps. The first one is just a failure in imagination. How could two people be this evil is basically the question that he has. Anyway, so point being that it seems completely unrealistic that two people could both, do something this horrible and awful. This crime was pretty unprecedented at the time. But of course, nowadays, we definitely understand how psychopathic partnerships can begin and how the partners can feed off of one another. So Dewey has some doubts, but he's leaning towards the correct theory, of course. Okay, so that takes us all the way to page 83. And we have a little bit of physical evidence, not much that's useful at this point anyways, but they have the adhesive tape, the yards of cord that were used to bind the victims, and photographs of the crime scene. Now, much of it, is photographs of the victims, which, someday can be used to illustrate the brutality of the crime to jury members. But there is one very valuable surprise. So we already mentioned the bloody footprint, but there was another set of footprints, a separate set of footprints, and they were footprints made in dust rather than in blood. So that's another, bit of evidence that definitely indicates to killers is that there are two separate sets of footprints. So that is another valuable thing that could help them out. Of course, at this point, unless they somehow manage to get track of the actual shoes, it's not going to do much. But eventually, it's like a could be helpful thing. Just could be. Another thing that Dewey is pursuing is Nancy Clutter's diary. He was thinking, maybe she said something useful. Maybe she said something valuable. But of course, it's mostly adorable teenage girl stuff. Talk about how in love with Bobby she is, and her last entry about Bobby coming over and watching TV. Anyways, so Bobby Rupp, as we thought, did go through a very extensive interrogation since he was the last one there. He gave the polygraph test. The situation with Bobby and Nancy's father was one reason why they suspected Bobby, but at the same time, even if Bobby was going to go absolutely crazy, why would he kill Nancy too? So anyways, that was one theory they chased down. Another theory concerned Nancy's cat, who for whatever reason she named Boobs. Don't ask. So Boobs, the cat, had been found lying in the barn 2 weeks prior to the death of the Clutter family, and Nancy suspected poison. So it's hard to see, of course, how a cat might lead them to the killer, but who knows? Maybe the killer was staking out the barn a few weeks beforehand and for some reason really needed to kill the cat. So anyways, sometimes things like that lead someplace, sometimes they're absolute dead ends. Dewey is chasing down everything that he possibly can. So fast forwarding a little bit, let's see, page 85 at the top talks about all the different leads that the other agents are chasing down, interviewing the Clutter family, and just kind of getting some general information on the Clutters. So through the course of their investigation, they do track down a few things that they think might be useful. So at the top of page 86, we have a couple of leads, potential leads. So Mr. Dunce has found a father and a son, and they had an issue with a business transaction. And anyways, there was some alcohol involved. There was some anger involved. So that was one possible idea that they had. Mr. Church was another agent who found another kind of suspicious story. A Mr. Smith believed that Mr. Clutter had killed his hunting dog. So again, that was a potential vengeance plot. And the rope was the same kind, or sorry, not the rope. The knot was the same kind of knot used to bind the four Clutters, the knot that was found in Mr. Smith's barn. So the theories so far are grudge got out of hand. Now, the one theory that they are kind of outright dismissing is robbery. So at the bottom of page 86, they talk about why they didn't think the motive was robbery. Mr. Clutter never carried cash. Mrs. Clutter had valuable jewelry on her that was not taken. But there was the wallet, there was Nancy's purse. There's serious kind of conflicting evidence about the robbery thing. So, yeah, anyways, point being, they're chasing down everything that they can, but, not much so far is really screaming, yes, this is it. So, on to the next section. And everybody's scared, of course. Miss Myrtle Claire isn't scared, though. Nothing scares her. She's old as the hills and just don't care. But we are getting some interesting information from the town. And one woman observed that if it had been anyone except the Clutters, anyone less admired, prosperous, secure, then maybe they wouldn't be so scared. But the Clutters, even though they weren't the wealthiest family, they were so well liked, so well respected, that it seems terrifying that something could happen to them. So anyways, that of course is making everyone pretty scared about things. And of course, the other factor in that is, 90% of the time, someone who is killed by someone they know. And in a town of 270 people, it's probably someone you know too. That's kind of the philosophy that's going around. Who could Mr. Clutter and his family have been killed by, who isn't someone that people know? Okay, so back to our killers. Having some food, eating burgers and things. The newspapers, of course, are covering the crime and talking about all the clues. Of course, you will notice that in this description of the clues, they do not mention the boot prints. If they were to mention the boot prints, you can, of course, be pretty sure that those boots would be chucked into a trash bin somewhere. So that's one thing that they are keeping secret. Okay, so Perry and Dick are kind of exploring their crime retroactively. And let's see. They both seem to have different reactions to the incident. Perry doesn't seem to want to eat anything, and Dick has developed a voracious appetite and just wants to eat everything. Now, there is one very interesting bit of information here, and it occurs at the top of page 91. Oh gosh, have I gone past it? No, I think I have. Okay, sorry. So there isn't a single connection. So that's what Dick says. Perry contradicts him, though, and he says, I can think of one. And that connection is a person. Floyd. Is that his name? So, Dick gives us his last name, Mr. Wells. So, who is Floyd Wells? Why is he so important? Is he someone who hired Dick and Perry to take out the Clutter family? Was he a connection who gave them the directions? Was he in love with Bonnie and wanted to sabotage the relationship and put Dick and Perry up to this? The possibilities are endless at this point, but Floyd Wells is the one connection that Dick and Perry think can actually tie them to this crime. So they seem pretty confident that there is no other way for them to be connected. Okay, moving on, flip over to page 92. There's another little dream that I want to talk about. So Perry, the dreamer, he's a big believer in superstition and premonitions, and he's had this dream repeatedly where he has a snake that tries to attack him. So if you remember when he listed his superstitions, one of them was snakes in dreams. So this seems to be kind of a recurring dream. But the the best part of this dream, I think, is the conclusion to the dream, the finale. So there's this bird, this yellow sort of parrot. And the parrot will appear when, this snake is getting him or something bad is happening, taller than Jesus, yellow like a sunflower. And the parrot will wing him off to paradise. So given the size of this creature and its color, I always tend to imagine Big Bird from Sesame Street and imagine this gigantic Big Bird coming forth to save Perry. So anyways, this is very deeply meaningful to Perry, and I shouldn't make fun of his Big Bird dream. But we also do find out some interesting things about his past. One of the reasons that Perry doesn't seem to be a big fan of nuns is that he lived in a California orphanage run by nuns. And if he did something that, was typical for children, like wetting his bed, they would beat him, sometimes with objects. He was beaten with a flashlight and didn't seem to be very kind to him. So he references very briefly some other torments that he's been through, but we'll find out more about Perry's dark and twisted history later. So anyways, that's that as far as some new information about Perry. And yes. So then at this end bit here, Dick once again reaffirms his love for blonde chicken. But Dick seems much less concerned premonition-wise than Parody does. Okay, moving on again. Susan Kidwell. Geez. Poor Sue. To have to see your best friend like that is something that I'm sure never leaves you. And she has a variety of really sweet, tender memories of her and Nancy and Babe the horse and Teddy. So anyways, the most grim part of this section is the description of the family in the funeral home. So, according to Susan, she and Bobby went into the funeral home. Now, this is one story that I'm not positive is 100% accurate. And I think what may have happened is that Truman Capote actually went into the funeral home and saw this scene, but ended up giving kind of credit for it to Bobby and Sue since he removes himself from the story entirely. So the coffins had not been sealed yet for whoever saw them. Nancy, of course, wore her dress that she made, the one that she was going to wear to church the next day. And everyone else is dressed nicely. But since they were all shot in the head, the funeral home tried to disguise this, which honestly, I'm not sure why you'd bother. I assume this is going to have to be a closed casket funeral anyways, but point being, they wrapped the head of each Clutter family member in cotton. So there was so much cotton wrapping up the heads that they were twice the size that they normally were, and twinkling like a Christmas tree because they've been sprayed with some sort of substance, maybe some sort of glue-like substance to keep them in place. So very creepy, very sad, of course. Susan's memory of Nancy, these kind of like halting sentences, showing how she's having difficulty continuing. I remember how excited she was the first time she wore it at a party. All I could see was Nancy's red velvet and Nancy in it, dancing. So a lot of that could have been connected, but this kind of fragmentary style definitely gives us the impression that she's having trouble continuing. Okay, carrying on. Last little section here, I believe, in this bit. Okay, so the Clutter Funeral has taken place. 1,000 people attended the Clutter Funeral, quite a few. But the focus is not the funeral, but rather back to Dick and Perry. So at this point, Dick and Perry are sort of weighing their options. When Perry gives us this story about what they did, of course, he wants to be able to get to Mexico off of the money that they made. We start to get a sense of why Dick was in prison the first time. Dick is a very skilled con man, and he ends up passing a variety of checks at a number of stores in order to get money that they need for their traveling purpose. So this is obviously a very old scheme. A lot of stores won't even accept checks now. It's either cash or cards, are your options. But back before credit cards were widely distributed amongst the population, this was a common way to pay for a large purpose, was to write a check. So when they go to this suit store, they select a variety of things, and they they seem to be making a very large purchase, right? But the con comes in not only getting the items by writing a bad check, a check that's going to bounce, but also making it out for more money than the bill kind of like when you put in a card and you get money back, like at a grocery store or something, you can ask for cash, for money back off of your card. So Dick is not only getting $80 in cash, which is a pretty good amount of money at this time. He's getting, these nice suits and the ring and things. And anyways, so we get that story, that information about Dick, but we also get a little more about Perry here. We learn about Cookie. We knew that Perry had a tattoo on him called Cookie. And I don't know what kind of human person names their child Cookie. I'm hoping it is a nickname. But point being that we do sense some romantic intimacy between Perry and Cookie. Love had been mentioned. Marriage had been mentioned. But it seems like Perry couldn't go through with it for some reason. Maybe some commitment issues. But obviously he cared about her if he got a tattoo of her name on his arm. And he gave this poem to her. I think the poem is really interesting. So this is on page 98. And please note, right before the poem, the word pretended. Perry did not actually write this poem. It's a poem by Robert W. Service. It's called The Men That Don't Fit In. But he took credit for this poem, presumably to make himself seem more intelligent or more cultured or more artistic. So this poem is Perry's representation of himself. The men that don't fit in. He perceives himself as one of these men that don't fit in, that can't stay still. They hurt the people around them. They just can't settle in a stable position in their life. So that's his perception of himself. So anyways, then we get back to the action of the story. They pawn the materials, and they have some money now. Dick has like a slight moment of guilt. Oh, what about my dad? These checks are going to bounce and he's going to try and make them good. And gosh, I feel so bad about that. So intriguing that Dick can express some guilt for bouncing the checks, but doesn't seem to have expressed any serious guilt about the quadruple murder that they committed. But oh well. So anyways, we again get Perry talking about his dreams, and Dick tries to reassure him, oh yeah, I'm with you all the way. But Perry does start to get the beginnings of the thought like, oh wait, is Dick really interested in this stuff? Or was he just pretending? Was he just faking the whole time? I don't know anymore. So we, of course, know that Dick really isn't terribly passionate about, searching for treasure and stuff like that, that his dreams are a little bit more traditional. So anyways, that brings us up to page 100. So things are moving along slowly but surely. They're evolving.